The cadets looked in the same direction as they were congratulated for passing the first test. They presented a token with a hieroglyph when they were informed that they would receive a bronze medal, signifying the lowest rank in the academy, and that they would spend the next 4 years as cadets of the Demon Academy. A man stopped in front of them and added that they were not allowed to answer yes or no there, and the only possible answer was the word motto, and any other answer would be akin to asking for an order to be repeated. The people were standing in front of a tall building when they were asked if everything was clear. Ben smiled ominously and said that then they would begin dividing into groups. There were needles on a tray when the patient was asked to start treatment, because everything was ready. Ash was lying down and looking away when he addressed the doctor. The man had his back to him when he said the name Klaus. He turned around and asked him to add his last name instead of just calling him doctor. The doctor sat down on the chair when the patient turned to him and asked if his condition was really that bad. The protagonist looked at him in shock when the doctor replied that he was sorry to tell a cadet of a Demon Academy, but it would take at least 11 to 15 days to participate in the next tests. Ash looked away, thinking about what he should do, because if Nano turned on the self-healing mode, then the treatment would end before it even started. Klaus looked down questioningly, while the protagonist thought about how if he recovered too quickly, he would be suspected. The boy's pupils narrowed when he thought about how if he agreed to the usual treatment, he would fall behind in his training, and about how he did not know anything that happened after the first test, because he was carried away to the infirmary. The doctor clenched his fist in front of him and asked him not to be upset, explaining that if he were treated by regular doctors, it would take months, but it would be much less time, because his teacher was very good. The protagonist looked away in disappointment and replied that it would still take a long time. Klaus was sitting next to his bed, who said that maybe it wouldn't help much, but he would pretend that he didn't know that the guy was learning martial arts from his right-hand bodyguard, so Ash thanked him and promised to repay him in the future. The doctor waved his hand, replying that he didn't expect anything in return. Klaus tore the guy's clothes off and exclaimed that since they were going to do acupuncture, he needed to get rid of his clothes. Klaus looked forward in surprise. The protagonist looked down at his toned body, while the doctor thought about how he knew the guy didn't learn martial arts, but his body was in much better shape than he thought. Klaus looked at the sludge in his hand and wondered if the boy had gotten this body from the Nigong or not by studying it. He brought the needle to his bare torso and said that the first needle was inserted into the middle of the sternum. The protagonist looked down in fear when Nano said that she had detected an attempt to harm the user's body with a sharp iron needle, so the self-defense mode was activated, and Ash told Nano to stop. The needle was almost in the skin when the protagonist explained that the doctor was doing this for healing. Sweat appeared on the boy's face when he asked Nano if she didn't know the difference between attacking and healing. Klaus looked at Ash in confusion when the nanomachine said that the self-defense mode was deactivated by the user's order. The protagonist closed his eyes when Nano added that without prior information about the actions with his body, she will consider any damage as an attack. Then Ash asked her not to react to actions that he does voluntarily from now on, to which the nanomachine replied that the order was accepted. Klaus stuck the needle in with a smile. The protagonist looked ahead in surprise when he realized that his stomach seemed to hurt less. Then Nano said that she was outputting information related to acupuncture from the built-in systems. She analyzed the way Klaus stuck the needles in and explained that acupuncture needles enter points on his body such as the lower sternum, under the heart, and in the arms, adding that 6 specific points are points that enhance regeneration in the stomach area. Then the guy replied that he understood the information she gave him before better. Ash looked intently at the doctor, then Klaus asked him to sleep until the acupuncture takes effect, adding that he was embarrassed that the guy was watching. Then he agreed. The protagonist lay with his eyes closed, thinking about how he couldn't sleep, listening to Nano explain how the needles were stuck under his knee, in his toes, and in his calves. Ash's eyes suddenly widened. Klaus was looking at the set of needles when he asked Nano if she could heal his internal organs. Would it speed up the healing, adding that if he healed too quickly, they would get suspicious. He had needles stuck in his stomach when he asked the nanomachine if it could heal him and make it look like he was still injured. Ash looked at the set of needles when Nano answered that after he was finished healing himself with self-healing, she could change his heart rate, thus creating the illusion of internal damage. The protagonist looked at the doctor when he thought that he asked this just in case, but he was glad that it was possible, because if he could fool Klaus for 2 weeks, then this would be his chance to learn Nigong with the right bodyguard. Ash looked away with satisfaction and asked Nano to heal him now and fool the doctor when he came to check on him. Then the nanomachine replied that it understood the master, and then said that the self-healing process was started at the user's command. The setting sun illuminated the trees. The man opened his mouth wide and ordered the cadets to line up. The man's cloak fluttered in the wind. He opened his mouth slightly and said that he would now explain to them what the next test was. The man stood at the top of the stairs when he added that until the third test, all the cadets would be tested at the same time. And in order to pass the second test and become mid-level warriors, they needed to have basic knowledge of tactics and strategy. Ben smiled and said that they only had 20 days. The scared cadets looked ahead, wondering how small it was and if they would be able to remember all the tactics and strategies. Ben crossed his arms and asked if they were curious as to why there were 20 groups, and then he replied that it was because in 3 weeks only 10 groups would be able to move on to the next stage. The scared cadets twisted their mouths, wondering if they were really going to tell them that half of the cadets would be expelled and that there was not a single strong cadet in their group. Jack looked ahead confidently when someone realized that the 6 clans had a clear advantage, then closed his eyes and laughed when he said that this was the first and last test that required teamwork, so if they wanted to compete against each other as a group they might as well all fail together, and Adam thought that he was still good at demotivating. Ben stood sideways as he announced that this was the end of their schedule for the day and that they could return to their dorms and rest. The men looked murderously ahead as he added that starting tomorrow the cadets would be trained by the instructors standing in front of them and that they would kindly teach them tactics and techniques. The frightened boys remembered the men beating up the other cadets and wondered if they hadn't been the ones who had beaten up those particularly rowdy kids. Birds were flying over the building as they were told they could go free. Dark shapes were visible on the ground. Steve was looking straight ahead. He was the instructor for Group 8. Someone stopped in front of him and he asked why cadet number 3 was still there. Jack smiled and told the instructor that he had something he wanted to ask him. They were standing in front of each other when Steve said that he was sure that the cadet knew that he couldn't answer questions about training, to which he replied that he could. Jack's eyes widened when the teacher asked him what he wanted to know, and the boy said that he was almost certain that he would be the leader of Group 8. Steve stared ahead silently, thinking that the election for leader was supposed to be tomorrow, but the 6 clans, as usual, considered the rules a joke. The boy in front of him opened his palm and explained that cadet number 7, who had been assigned to their group, was currently in the infirmary. Jack looked ahead nervously as he explained that because one person was missing from the group test, he didn't want the entire group to fail. He closed his eyes and added that since he wasn't at the ceremony, cadet number 7 didn't know anything about what was coming, so he wanted to fill him in on everything he had learned today. Steve stared ahead in surprise and said nothing. Jack smiled nastily, thinking that the lowborn scum in the same group as him, that is, the one who was out of luck, so he himself would come to the infirmary to finish him off. Steve grabbed the guy by the shoulders and exclaimed that this was a great idea, and that he saw that the cadet had already agreed on a base, so he congratulated him on his first day. Jack looked shocked and asked the teacher again, who said that he would take his advice on board and, as the instructor of the group, would go to the main building to pass on the information to cadet number 7. Steve had his back to him when the guy said that the instructor should not do this and that he would handle it himself. The teacher glared back and said that the main building was not accessible to cadets except for special cases. Jack froze in place, thinking that he had not expected to be unable to get into the main building, and then asked why things were not going according to plan. He clenched his fist when he realized that he was a candidate for the Creek clan, but he couldn't even use it there, adding that there was no other way. The instructor held his hand out to the side and told the cadet to go back to his dorm when he replied that he understood, and that in that case he was asking for a favor. Steve turned around and asked if there was anything else he wanted to say when the boy called out to him. Jack looked away and asked if he could at least let him know when cadet number 7 joined them. The instructor turned away and waved his hand when he replied that it was no problem, and that it was late today, so he would let him know tomorrow, and the boy thanked him. Jack blew in the wind as he thought that since things were going this way, he would have to wait until he got back to the dorm. The boy smiled creepily and mentally asked the lowborn scum to hurry up with his recovery, because he would make him suffer so much that he would beg for death. So, friends, this chapter comes to an end. What will happen next? We'll uncover it in the next chapter. Don't forget to rate this chapter out of 10 in the comments. We'll see you in the next video. Until then, take care and goodbye. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel.